What's up, guys? So today we're going to do a Tech Tuesday, a little bit different than in the past. Previously, I'm usually showing you something on the engine from within our shop, Smetting Performance. However, today I'm going to be using my computer and we're going to be going over some different data logs and talking about oil pressure and how you can determine the correct oil weight you need for your motor. Because a lot of people like to think that you want as much pressure as possible, when in reality, there is certainly such a thing as having too much oil pressure. Whenever there's too much oil pressure in the engine, it will cause the oil to heat up unnecessarily. One of oil's biggest jobs is to remove heat from the bearings and the journals and the rings especially. And so whenever we have too much oil pressure, it's going to turn into heat, because pressure is heat is friction. Pressure creates friction, which creates heat. I think is how that works. So basically today I'm going to show you how on my personal LS engine and my Corvette, I was able to look at the oil pressure and data logs compared to RPM and temperature and determine what weight oil I need to correctly suit this engine. So with that being said, I'm going to switch you guys to the laptop view and I'll pick you up there. Okay, so here's one of the first data logs with my current 402 cubic inch LS. You can see here we have oil pressure, we have idle RPM, and then coolant temperature right below it. There it is. So it's important that whenever you're trying to decide your oil weight or checking if your oil weight is correct, the engine needs to be at operating temperature. But not only are we talking about engine coolant temperature, however, we're also talking about oil temperature. Generally, oil temperature takes about 10 to 15 minutes to fully warm up to match your coolant temperature. So make sure your engine has been running long enough to see that. But what I want you to look at right now is our oil pressure is currently at 62 pounds, and coolant temperature is warmed up. I'm saying the oil temperature is warmed up for the sake of this video at only 900 or 1,000 RPM. Now this is way too much oil pressure for what we're doing, and you can see as we start to drive the car right here, at 1600 RPM, we jump to almost 70 pounds. And now let's start driving some more. And here we go. We're going 2100 RPM, 70 pounds of pressure at part throttle cruising. So let's skip to the very end of this log. And you can see here again, even at 2100 RPM, we're still at 65, almost 70 pounds of oil pressure. So currently in the engine, I had 15W40 in it as a break-in oil. Good starting place. And because we're just braking in the motor, I'm not concerned too much about having too much oil pressure, but before we start doing power pulls, I want to turn that down. So just due to how much pressure I had in the engine, I ended up going to a 5W30 weight, and that's in the next pool, or the next data log. Let me get that loaded up now. Okay, here is a full throttle dyno pool of the motor, and I don't know if this is the first or last or whatever pool, but I had been making pools, and so I'm confident that everything is as warmed up as it's going to be. And you can see now, even with the straight 530 weight at 2500 RPM, I still have over 60 pounds of oil pressure, so still a bunch of pressure. And we start to make our pool, and oil pressure goes to 70 pounds at 4,000 RPM, and then it kind of hovers around there. It goes to 75 at 6,000, and then it hits the pressure relief spring and about stops there. So at high RPM, pressures are good with the engine. We want to target 10 pounds per 1,000 RPM. So you can see we're just starting to creep up to it. We're still a little on the heavy side as far as oil pressure goes, but we're much better than the 1540 was. So now let me skip to a full Texas mile. So basically this is all 530. So then before the Texas mile, I cut it in half and I ran 3 quarts of 5W20 and then 3 quarts of 5W30. Okay, so here's a Texas mile data log. And I couldn't tell you which run of the day this was, but let me zoom out here a little bit. These data logs are pretty big because they last 30 seconds. So you can see now, while I'm just idling, waiting for my turn to launch, we're idling at about the 36 PSI range. Remember on the straight 1540, we were idling at like 60 pounds. So this is much better, more attractive. And then you see here in first gear, at 4,000 RPM, we've got about 66 pounds. If we go up to 5,000 RPM, we've got about 70 pounds. And then I short shifted there. And then second gear, I ran all the way out. And you can see it hovering at about 68, 70 PSI. So right now, this is pretty much on the money for where I need the car to be as far as oil weight. So I'm going to keep running this 520, 530 combo. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You get kind of a hybrid, your own oil weight mixture, I guess, of what, 5W25, I guess. And I'm happy with that. Now, as you can see though, so even in fourth gear here, going 130 miles an hour, 6,500 RPM, we still have 66 PSI of oil pressure, so that's good. I'm happy with that. However, when I hit fifth gear, and scroll out, and now we're just singing the motor out there. It is just up there in RPM. You'll actually see pressure starts to drop, and I believe this is due to me being wide open throttle for almost 30 seconds. Basically, the engine is cavitating, and it's either doing that by too much windage or by sucking the sump dry. I believe it might be a hybrid of the two of them, so I am adding an oil accumulator to the car before the next mile event. And I'm going to see if that fixes this problem of pressure dropping off only in the top of fifth gear. It loses a few PSI. But I am going to go back out with a 520, 530 combo. This car does run pure E85, and I'm actually considering running a methanol blend just for the mile. That's to get a few more horsepower out of it due to methanol's oxygen content. When I'm regular street driving, I change the oil in this car every 1,000 miles because it is straight E85, and E85 loves to thin out oil compared to gasoline. But with the methanol, I'm going to change it immediately after the Texas mile because that stuff is pretty aggressive. And I think I've got the fuel system to handle about a 50-50 cut of E85 and straight VP M5 methanol. So that'll be cool and fun to play with. But anyways, that's all I've got for y'all today. Basically 10 pounds of pressure per 1,000 RPM. Follow that rule and your motor will live forever. Well, this is mainly for pushrod V8s. I personally don't know if overhead cam motors are the same. I know Coyote engines from Ford run an absolute ton of oil pressure, so there may be something different, but that may also be for the VVT system. I know that stuff's pretty complex and requires a lot of oil pressure. Oops. But that's about it for a regular pushrod V8, small block Ford, LS, whatever you've got. Pretty simple, and don't be afraid to mix oil weights. A lot of people think you can't do that. You definitely can. It is no oil company will ever tell you you cannot mix 520 and 530 or even 530 and 540 to kind of really dial in the combination. It's probably overkill, and I'm thinking way too much into it, but I do it. It's my personal car and got nothing really to lose. Can squeeze a few more horsepower out of it when everything counts. So anyways, that's all I've got for y'all today. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything you'd like me to cover next time or something you want to hear about, and I'll see y'all later.